So tell us about the amps. So you started your own line of amps, and so we've got two of them here, and they're called the JOAT, which stands for Jack of all trade.
Jack of all tone.
Jack of all tone.
Jack of all tone, my friend.
Yeah, I got it. Jack of all tone. And this is a 20 watt.
It's 20 watts.
Yeah.
The RT means reverb and tremolo. And so it actually is a little bit of a different approach design-wise. It's I'm not, reinventing the wheel. It's this amp, the 20 watter, has a pair of EL84s. Okay. For us, gear nuts know what that tube's about. It's kind of a chimey, bright, maybe a little bit Britishy sounding tube. The Vox amp made that tube famous.
Right.
The Vox AC30, AC15. And it's push-pull circuit. It's a Class AB amplifier. Nothing too revolutionary there going on in my output stage. But the way the architecture of the amp runs otherwise is a different approach. Okay. So one of the things I think, like when I was talking about when I figured out the Strat and the Ampeg VT40, and it was the first time I could plug my Strat into an amplifier and turn the thing up a little bit and not feel like I got to have a pedal plugged in. If I'm going to play a lead, I'm going to need a booster of some kind. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? Until I found that Ampeg. So I always thought that was an extraordinary thing about that amp, and it stuck with me in terms of when I design, that's on my design board. Input stage that receives single coil pickup properly.
Okay.
Number one. The other thing, and so that's one of the things that's unique. I have a little Pento to 6AU6 tube, and so we got enough pickup right to the first tube muscle for a single coil. This is a very single coil loving amplifier here, this little baby. We of course have a volume control because we're going to need that.
Right.
And then from there, so as a amplifier student and doctor, I've been in every amplifier that's been made, I think, at this point. Last 20 years I've been fixing amps for guitar players.
Right.
So I think most of us, when we find a great amp, there's something that's going to happen. There's an interaction that we like that's probably kind of hard to verbalize. And usually you're plugging in and you set the bass here and you put the treble here. And then it's volume and reverb and tremolo adjustments if it's got reverb and tremolo. But that's usually about it. And I just always kind of scratched my head over that and went, the bass pot on virtually every guitar amp I could ever think of really doesn't even fit an electric guitar properly. It's actually a bass pot. You can't really turn a bass pot all the way up. I mean, when would you ever do that? You could on an English Marshall, early ones, right? Because they're so trebly. You could actually turn the treble off and the bass on and just use the mid. But that's probably the only amp, right? Yeah. Everything else, it's just kind of like this, you just kind of set the bass there. You wouldn't want to put it on 4. And the treble, you might want to adjust it occasionally if you're playing a bridge pickup Telly or a neck pickup Les Paul, treble's going to change.
Yeah.
So the point being that a tone stack, which is what we call that, right? There's really only about 3 circuits that people use. There's a backside and all filter circuit, it's called. And then we use this classic tone stack, which almost every amp uses. So I don't have a tone stack. You don't get a bass pot, you don't get a treble pot here with my amp.
Okay.
And so what I like to say is it's because it's all tone. It's all there. When you put that and you insert that in the circuitry, it's a lost circuit. So although you get some ability to adjust tonally, you lose the immediacy of what your fingertips are feeling on the fingerboard. That starts to go away. And if you didn't know the difference, you'd never know that. So this is the kind of crap that a maniac like me has been playing around with for literally years, in building up little parts of circuits and tacking them together and keeping a notebook. So with this amp, what I did is I have a switch. It's switches. They're like switched stepped tone settings. So you got a volume control, and you have a rotary switch called attitude, which sets the attitude, believe it or not, of the first gain stage of the amplifier. So I got this little pentode in there, and there's different ways you could bias that pentode. And this gets very techy, but
Yeah.
you can change the way the screen grid operates. You can change the way the cathode is biased, tonally and gain-wise, not with knobs, but with some components that actually make it behave differently and sound differently also. So that's it runs tamest, kind of natural setting right there in the bottom. That's a little bit of a shelved top, the next setting, a little more classic rock maybe sounding, and also a little more aggressive. And the straight up one is super wide, very bright and very deep, and a little more gain. Most country or cleaner players are going to like that one. It's usually the setting I use if I choose to use a pedal, because if I need the gain, I'd use a pedal. The amp likes a pedal. That one is kind of like the second one, a little more of a shelved top, an accentuated mid-range, but more gain, more of a rock and roll sound.
Okay.
And that one's full on. That's everything we can get out of this thing, that and a volume control. And then so from there I have a low cut. So when it's all the way up, it's full low end, and there's plenty of it. Occasionally you need all of it. Usually, and it's one thing I tell people who own these is like, by all means, turn that stuff down. I have the same thing with a high cut. So anyhow, the low cut is a switched step to the way the signal is coupled. There's different values of components in 2 different stages at the same time to kind of, again, maintain that touch. So if your sound's a little boomy, you roll off a little low, and you by adjusting that. These are effects controls. My high cut is a different way of approaching it too. So instead of a treble pot, and also we go back to looking at all the classic push-pull amplifier circuits. Almost all of them use global negative feedback to tame the amplifier, keep it from oscillating, and tame the high frequencies and lower the distortion. It's really a hi-fi trick, but it just gets used into guitar amps. We're not really after hi-fi here. You know what I mean? We're not trying to reproduce accurately some sound here. We're trying to create a sound. So and as guitar players, we like distortion. We like a little bit of wild hair, and etc. So this amp runs wide open. And so what global negative feedback is you take a portion of the speaker signal, actually what goes to the speaker, and you feed it back into an earlier stage in the amp. There are stages in an amplifier invert every time you go through another stage. It inverts the phase. So if you put it at the right place where it's out of phase, it subtracts from the signal. So most amplifiers, as soon as you turn it on, it's taking some of your sound away to make the amp flat and less distortion and also more stable. Because amplifiers will break into flat out oscillation if you're not very careful about how you design things. So I don't use that kind of feedback. This thing runs wide open. So it's pretty bright.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I meant about, I got to remind people, you may not want to run low and high all the way wide open unless you got some really dull sounding guitar, because that would be really bright.
Yeah.
But then again, you might want it really that bright for a record or something,
Yeah.
So my high cut, I take the output tube plates and I actually feed them to each other through some components, through this big attenuator network. It's kind of a crazy way of doing it and requires highly rated, high voltage stuff and a massively expensive switch to switch it with. But it also gives you this different way of operating the amp and knocking some high end off and adding some compression to the high end, which makes, it's an amplifier. It's kind of like, what do you want of the amp? And, like mostly what I want is when I hold a big D chord, I want it to just go like before it fades out, So I've spent years messing around with, so how do you do that? How do you get, So with that high cut, that's part of it in my amp. It's a different way of going after treble attenuation. I spent a lot of time matching my power supply where it saturates and it can't give you any more because you've asked it everything.
Yeah.
And the output tubes where they're clipping. You play with that ratio. That's how you get a little bit of sag and compression and those nice ways of, you hit the note and it's right there. But maybe it squashes a little if you play it loud. That's what we like when we turn amps up.
Yes.
So these are all things that for me as a player, most players don't know about this stuff, right? They just kind of plug in and go, I like it, or I don't like it. Or you end up like, yeah, man, I'm still playing the old Twin. The thing sounds good sometimes. And I don't know, I spent many a night on stage fighting the amplifier going, I don't know what else to do. All I know is who put the heavier strings on my guitar?
Yeah.
Because this thing feels terrible.
Yeah.
I can't hear it. It doesn't feel good and it doesn't sound right.
Yeah. You're fighting it.
I'm fighting my amplifier again. Yeah. So, those are the kind of thoughts that go through the head of a guy like me as an amp designer, that's what I just want to make great guitar amps. And I wouldn't care what you got to do to do it, to achieve it.
Yeah.
I've so far, I don't know if this is going to fly yet because my stuff's expensive too. It has to be. It's not for everybody. It's just for guys who want like the best amp there is. That's the amp I'm building. I'm building Dumbles and train wrecks. I'm certainly not interested in building another Tweed Deluxe.
Yeah. We don't need any more.
Yeah. And, so I have that, that's what I chase. And I really do chase it.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of trial and error. Everything you change up front changes the back end. You change the back end, now the front end's too bright. You could change the wire and the amp sounds different sometimes. I swear to God. In my 30-watt amp, which I got one of those back here, to just maybe illustrate how deep after it I'm going here is, output transformer is a very critical element in any amplifier. So I kind of do my design process I have a stash of output transformers that I start with, and then I try and adjust that one if I need to. So this is a 30-watt version. This one has a pair of EL84s, 20 watts. This one has a pair of EL84s and a pair of 6 V6s together.
Wow.
And in searching for the perfect output transformer, I've so far ended up using 2 of these transformers because I love this transformer. And I couldn't find the right balance of tone and the way the iron saturates. You can make a real clean amp. Like I could put something like a Bassman type transformer on that, and it's going to stay real tight and wide. But usually, what you're after in a guitar amp is that focus the picture in, and then when you turn it up, it needs to, it's like a great compressor. It's not really distortion. It is distorted. It's about how it clips and holds, and always what your fingers feel. So in this case, I so far am actually taking 2 output transformers instead of using one, and wiring them together, which, when I first did it, and I thought, that's crazy. I can't do that. I mean, I don't have room on the chassis. Maybe I'll put one on top and one on the bottom. That's crazy. And I kept trying not to do it. And I eventually said, wait a minute. Well, I don't care. No one else cares. It's going to be more expensive this way.
Yeah.
But it's the sound. It's what we're after. So let's go for what we're after, Anyhow, that's a little bit of a window into my insane, obsessive, quest. My own standards are pretty. I've been working on this stuff for a long time, and finally just got to a place where I said, "Am I ready to, be able to make the commitment to say I'm going to start this company. I'm going to build guitar amplifiers, which means." If Clapton calls, I'm gonna have to not take the call. I can't do the tour, man. I'm sorry.
Can't do the tour.
Clapton isn't calling, but
Yes,
he did.
but if he did,
yeah. So it kind of took me a while to get to where like I'm ready to commit to this for the next. This is kind of my next.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 60 soon. This is what I'm going to be doing from here on out. Is building guitar amps and hopefully building the best amps that there are. And I'm willing to go after whatever I got to go after to do that.
Yeah. Well, we want to hear them. But
you don't want to hear them?
So you're gonna play us, you're gonna demo the amps a little bit, and you're gonna use a couple of your guitars. So you're gonna use that 59 Strat that you talked about earlier. Now tell us, this is a 56 that's been converted.
This
correct?
Actually is a 56 gold top. Yeah, I've had it for years. It's I used it with some of those people we talked about. It's on Christine's record.
Yeah,
a couple of tracks, and like a lot of my this one has kind of a storied history. It's been stolen and returned with different pickups.
Yeah,
I bought it kind of this way. It was I wish it was an original gold top because I'd love to have one, but someone stripped the top and put humbuckings in it, and I bought it in about 82 like that. Pretty nice Les Paul. It's not too heavy.
Yeah.
And
it's a great looking guitar.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's the most important thing, they look good.
They look good. It feels good.
And by the way, this will look marvelous.
This looks marvelous. Well, Todd, let's gear up to hear you play through the amps and kind of show us what they can do. One last question about the amps. The choice of speakers. You've got Celestian Blues in here. Why are you using those speakers on this amp?
Well, when I found the Vox AC30, however long ago, those speakers are part of it.
Yes.
And they're just great sounding guitar speakers. They can be a little bright. You kind of have to tame them. Mm-hmm. But they got that special kind of, I don't know what, I kind of call it a coppery sound, a certain kind of sheen to them, a little brassy sounding on the top. And I think they're making them very well, the new reissue series. As a matter of fact, I'm just now evaluating, they have yet another one they call the Cream,
Yes.
and it's the 90-watt version.
Yes.
And I think it's a pretty good speaker. I mean, so far I'm scratching my head over it a little bit. Anyhow, I like them, so I'm using them. And you know, I 212. I'm a 212 guy. A lot of people are saying to me, you know, you got to build a combo, and why don't you build a combo? And that's too much stuff for me to carry around. And I get it, and I probably will get a combo up and running pretty soon. But my approach to this, I'm very stubborn about this, is that I just want to make the best amp that we can make, and that isn't a combo. Because combo amps are kind of compromises of let's shove that amplifier inside that box and see if we can make it so the tubes won't rattle and baffle the cabinet in some way that, you know, it's got to be tiny, so we're not going to be able to do it properly, but it might sound all right, you know, and that's kind of what most combos are. I mean, now and then somebody hits a real magic note, but I thought that before I start from a, you know, with those limitations of how am I going to get this thing to sound fat with a single 12 in a little tiny box? Well, you know, that's a real trick. But 212s, I'm a 212 guy, so I'm just kind of going like, I'd rather make the standard first and then figure out how to adjust what I'm doing to be smaller somehow. You know? But that's going to be hard. It's going to be a trick to do that.
Okay. Well, Todd, I really appreciate you, you know, coming out, and we're going to hear some clips of you. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show my reverb a little bit, which is more of a plate sound than it is a spring. For most guitar amps, it's a little different. It's tube driven. I use 2 reverb springs. Just kind of try and show you some of the reverb sound and decay. The reverb also has like a pull bright on it if you like really brighter, you know, style. And we got a lot of reverb. If we want to shorten it up a little. So let me show you some tremolo, which we also have a real wide range of real stable, slow trem to it gets pretty fast. It also goes from very subtle intensity to, you can actually get it to stutter if you ever want to do that. All the way off. So I'm going to take the amp up a little bit in aggressive and change the tone just slightly with that attitude. So this is a little more of a aggressive sound. Again, I'm playing a pretty much of a stock Strat. No, I got no pedals, and just going straight into the amp. I'll kick in a little reverb in here. Get the old Les Paul plugged in. I've actually tailored the inputs a little differently for different kinds of pickups. So input 1 is a little different from 2. So I often like to go into 2 with a humbucking. So I'll kind of just start with something a little more tame, maybe. And let me show you a little bit about that low cut too. So I just started out with the lows cut back a bit. I'm going to cut back a little of the high cut, or add a little high cut actually. A little bit more. So here's a little bit more of a full-on, open, more gain. This is a bite switch, which is going to add a little bit more of aggressive, kind of a more martial-y British character. So without changing anything else, I'm just going to hit that bite switch. We're going to get more gain, but especially in the upper mid-range. now want to show you where the high cut kind of comes in. Sometimes you use both of those together. So it'll rock out a little bit, you know, without a pedal. And also, I'm currently in the number 2 input, which is a lower gain. And there's no rules here. You can go into number 1 and get even more. If I take some of that high cut back off, it'll get plenty bright. This is my Dorado, and I got it tuned down a whole step, and it's got some big funky tone. So let's hear some of that.